talk about is this idea of an array. And an array is somewhat similar to a list, except it's kind of the way that we're going to work with them often is as a 2D array. So it's like a list within lists. And if we look at this again, these arrays come from NumPy. And if we look at this thing, what it has is rows and columns. All right, that's what our 2D arrays are going to have, rows and columns. In just a second, we'll see kind of a 3D array that has rows, columns, and values for each of the three values in the rows and columns. Right, sort of stack of things. So if we want to interact with this array, for example, if we wanted to select this first row, A is formatted as like rows, columns. That's how we'll be able to access these elements, but it's always going to be by index. So that first row is row 0. There we go, 4, 5, 6. The first column, if we want all of the rows in that first column, we'll say colon, just like we did with the list syntax to subset things. And this is the first column, 495. Suppose we wanted to select a region here that was maybe this little 2x2 square in the bottom. Well, then we would say something like we want to start at the first row and go to the end, and at the first column and go to the end, and that will be that square. Okay. All arrays have a shape attribute that tells us what the dimensions of it are. So this one's a 3x3. And these are not only important, as we'll see in a minute, for representing images, but also because the subplots in Matplotlib take the form of arrays. So let's go ahead and make a subplot with 2 plots on it. And the way that we do this is we say fig, ax equals plt.subplots. And I'm going to say n rows equals 1 and n cols equals 2. Now, this axes object, this thing is an array. It's a 1x2 array. Okay, so there's only there's 1 row and 2 columns. So it's really just a one-dimensional thing. So the columns are the only things that will change. So if we want the thing in the first column, that would be ax 0. The second column is ax 1. And we could just plot our earlier data. To each. Okay, and similar to what we saw before, if you want to add titles or things to these subplots, it's almost identical, but unfortunately, a lot of times they have a little different syntax. So for the titles, we have to say set underscore title, and that'll give us the title. So sometimes for the strings and the labels and things, it will be set underscore instead of the syntax that we had used before we were doing subplots. Now also, maybe we want to make a grid of plots, so some rows and columns. Then to refer to those individual things, so let's make a 2x3 grid of plots. Then we refer to them with that array syntax. So the first row, second column, we can plot something to, and we won't plot anything anywhere else. Okay? And so on and so on. All right, but we have 6 different axes here. 0, 0 is right here. 0, 1, that's right here. First row, second column. 0, 2, 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, 2. All right, so that's how we can use those subplots. This, however many rows and columns, we get an array of those, and then we access elements of that array and plot to them. So the last thing is we want to think about this array, again, as an image. This is a very basic one, where these numbers represent an amount of a color. So we can actually look at this array in Matplotlib as an image with plt.imshow. Right, and you see that we get some sort of colored representation. Really what that would be is, can change the color map here to gray and look at this in grayscale, and that's a more appropriate way to view those single values. Now I've also loaded in some JPEGs, some image files here. So let's read a couple of these in. Let's read in dog1. And Matplotlib again has an imread function, and I can just pass it a file name string. So let's get this 12374. And we'll read in one more here. 2525. And if we look at what kind of a thing these are, they are arrays. All right, and if I look at the size of the first one, you see it's 348 rows, 419 columns, and 3 channels of colors, an amount of red, green, and blue. So let's plot these guys in subplots. Again, we can create the subplots with figax plt.subplots. We'll use 1 row and 2 columns here. So then my first plot, I can say imshow dog1, and the second plot I can say .imshow dog2, and there we go. We've got some dogs. But again, you can plot anything to any of these subplots. So if we wanted to add one more plot, instead make it a 1x3, then we can also throw in something like a histogram of our penguins as well. Okay? So any of these axes we can do any of Matplotlib things to. And we're just controlling them as arrays. Also, we have images as arrays. So just understanding kind of rows and columns of objects and how to get in there and subset them is another important thing to start getting used to for our visualizations.